you need to talk about with your spouse what your vision for your life is and talk about why it's important to you. Welcome to the Ryan Rice Show, where we talk about what we learned yesterday that we can apply today so that we can be better tomorrow. I hope you enjoy and subscribe. Someone asked me this week, how do I change my health and my eating habits when my spouse has no desire to do so and more has a mentality of, well, I've eaten like this for a very long time and I'm fine now, so I'm just going to keep doing that. And I thought this might be something that a lot of people struggle with, and so I wanted to make this episode because if you're trying to change your health or eating habits, I think this could help. And or if you're trying to do so and you don't have what you feel is support from the person that you spend the most time with, whether that's a partner or a spouse, then I think this could help. And here are a few of my thoughts on how to go about doing this. There's really two elements at play here. The first element is your relationship with your spouse, the person that you spend the most time with. And I think that's important because the person you spend the most time with is going to be the one who influences your behavior the most, but also inversely is somebody that you have the ability to influence their behavior the most. And we'll talk about that in a second. But the relationship is the first element here. The second element is your behavior. And I think about your behavior in terms of two different pieces. The first is your specific actions that you're taking regarding your eating habits. And the second is your behavior with your spouse and how you behave with your spouse in regards to your eating habits while you're making some changes. So first, from a relationship standpoint, there are, I think, three core tenets to any good relationship. And any relationship that I have seen last a really long time or have significant longevity or be successful, I feel like have three things. They have shared vision, shared values, and shared interests. And my wife and I have talked about these three things a lot lately. And what's funny is I think we didn't realize a lot of these things when we first got married, but since have engaged in some more deliberate discussions. And it's been incredibly fruitful for us. But in regards to health and eating, this is a situation where this individual has conflicted vision, has conflicted values, and may not have similar interests, right? Because the person has a vision for a different health and eating type of lifestyle, very much values making their health and making their eating better, and is interested in doing the things or in talking about the things or potentially buying or not buying things that would inhibit the behavior necessary to make some health and eating changes in regards to their habits. And so I think this is so important because in any successful relationship, again, I think this concept could be applied to any difficulty or any sort of conflict, but we're going to specifically kind of hone in on health and eating here, but I think it could be applied to anything, right? If your vision for your life is entirely different from a career perspective with your spouse, if your vision for your life is different from a kid's perspective, if one of you values hard work and the other person values drinking and being out with and playing with friends all the time, those values are going to be conflicting, right? So regardless of what the scenario is, I think successful relationships, from what I have seen, have that shared valued vision and interests. And we're going to specifically dive into that again from a health perspective here. But transitioning to your behavior, what are some specific tactics that you can take? And what are some specific steps that you can take to start making a change if you feel like you may not have the support, or if your vision for your health and your values for your health does not align to that of your spouse? Well, here are some things that I think that you can do to start to implement a different health and eating type of lifestyle. And the first thing I think is very helpful is defining what your vision of your life is from a health perspective and doing that with your spouse. And so the first step is going to be directly related to one of the core tenets of your relationship, which is you need to talk about with your spouse what your vision for your life is and talk about why it's important to you, right? So for me, my health is extremely important when I think about the vision for my life. And one of the biggest reasons is because when I'm 60, I don't know if I'm going to have grandkids, right? I can't predict the future. But when I'm 60, 65, 70, I want to be constantly moving. I want to be able to enjoy being out and about with my kids, with my grandkids. I want to instill healthy values to my kids. And I know the best way to do that is by living by example. And so that is an example of a vision that I have for my life that I would communicate to my wife as something that is important to me. And so if we're talking about our future as a relationship, I'm going to say, hey, here's a vision that I have, and I want to be very clear with you on why it is that I have it. And I think we should discuss, because if you don't have that vision, then we should talk about how we can live with two visions that appear to be conflicting at the same time. And so I think the first thing that would be helpful in this scenario is to sit down with your spouse. Hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. I have this vision for my life. Here is my vision in regards to my health and my eating habits. And this is why it's really important to me. And what I think is great to communicate here is how your spouse can help you. And let's assume that you guys are married and that you love each other. If your spouse really loves you, then you communicating to your spouse how he or she can help you is going to get a positive reaction. And if you really love your spouse, you communicating what your vision for your own health is you actually showing love to your spouse, because you are communicating to your spouse, hey, here's what's important to me. Here's why it's important to me. And communicating that to your spouse in and of itself is showing your spouse how much you love them, because you're telling them what's important to you and you want to collaboratively involve them in your future vision, right? Because you know that they are part of your future life. And so it's important to discuss that. So being clear with how your spouse can help you is important in this regard. And it could be as simple as, hey, one way that you could help me is if I'm trying to make a behavior change, or if I am trying to instill certain eating habits for myself, hey, you can do whatever you want. That's fine. But what would help me is when you make comments like, oh, look at you, you're trying to eat healthy, that really kind of brings me down and makes me feel guilty. And so you not communicating those things to me would be helpful. Is that something that you think you could commit to? And what's funny is that when you address something that seems so small, I'll say, it can be very impactful, because maybe your spouse didn't realize the impact that words that simple could have on you. And so by simply communicating them, that in and of itself can help. Now, if your spouse says, oh, honey, I just want you to stay unhealthy. I want to kiss that mouth with Oreo crumbs all over it. I can't wait to spend our retirement on health concerns, and I can't wait to live in the hospital when we're after 60. And that's how much I truly enjoy eating unhealthy with you. You know, then you guys can have a different discussion. But that is unlikely to happen, I think. And simply starting by sitting down and communicating very clearly what your vision for your life is in terms of your health, and communicating how your spouse can help you, is a great first step. Second, try, if you have never tracked what it is that you eat, the second that I started doing this, it was so helpful from a health perspective because I had so many realizations that I didn't have prior. And here's what I mean. We eat three things, right? We either eat carbs, we either eat fat, or we eat protein. And then there's alcohol, which is a fourth thing that doesn't have nutritional value, but it does have caloric value. But most of what we eat is carbs, fat, and protein. And if we can understand how much carbs, how much fat, and how much protein we're putting into our body when we eat whatever it is that we're eating, that in and of itself can create awareness. And that awareness can help us drive behavior change. And even if we don't have behavior change as a result of the awareness, just having the awareness in and of itself can put us in a whole different perspective or a whole different spectrum. Because if we eat, say, 4,500 calories one day because we, didn't track everything that we were eating and we just finally added it up and we're like, oh my gosh, that actually is 4,500 calories. Whether or not that drives a behavior change might be something entirely different, but just the awareness in and of itself, I think, is important. And I think about it like this. And anytime I have suggested that to someone in the past, either verbally, they'll express to me that that is, quote, annoying, or that is, quote, too much or excessive, or I can read it in their body language, assuming that they're not receptive to it, of course. And I think of it like this. Would you ever drive your car on a long trip without a gas gauge? We would never do that because we need to know how much gas is in the car, because if we run out of gas, we need to fill up. And if our car didn't have sensors that when we're trying to fill it up with gas, the gas would automatically stop flowing, but we're just constantly pouring gas in, then it would be something similar, right? And so just simply tracking what it is that you're eating can be extremely helpful because you just become aware of what it is that you're putting in your body and how much of each macro that you're putting into your body. When I say macro, carbs, fat, and protein, each of those three things are a macronutrient. And when I say macro for short, that is what I mean. And when you start tracking what you eat, you're going to have to make these little behavior changes, right? You're going to pull out something. And what I use for this is an app called MyFitnessPal. It was bought by Under Armour a few years back. And it's a very easy, very simple app. And I've never come across a food that is not in its database. And so I can literally, anytime I'm eating something, I can pull open the app, I can type it in, and boom, it's there. Sometimes I can even do this if I'm out at a restaurant, or for example, I ate at Chipotle 2 days ago and I type in Chipotle chicken, and sure enough, all of the macronutrients come in for Chipotle chicken because I cross-reference it on the website because I was curious what macronutrients were in Chipotle chicken, and it was accurate. And so there's a very, very large database that is there and available to you. And it's a database that seems to have accumulated over the years of people just putting all of the different foods that are available out there. So very simple tool. And so you're going to be out with friends, or you'll be at home with your family or with your spouse. Your family is going to observe you doing that. And again, it's going to be very common to get comments like, oh, look at you, tracking what you eat. How are your carbs doing? How's your protein doing? And it comes across condescending. And first of all, you just need to know that the reason why people make these comments to you is because they want you to go back to who you were before. Because it makes the person feel worse about themselves if you're getting better and you're leaving them behind. They make these comments because they want to try to regress you back towards your mean, because if you are not improving, you're going to make the person feel less worse about themselves because they're not making any behavior change. They want to feel like what they're doing is okay. And so if they bring you back down and you stop doing those things, you stop improving yourself, then it's going to make them feel better. And so you have to realize and you have to know that any comments that they make about that or about you doing different behaviors, it's not about you. It's about them. And it's about the discomfort that you are causing them because you are becoming a better person and you are making them feel, quote, bad. And so they're going to make those little comments. That's why I think it's good to address that in the beginning when you communicate to your spouse. For example, hey, here's my vision for my life. Here's why I want it. And here's what's important to me. Here's how you can help. And you tell them that those little comments, if they're not made, that is going to help you contribute towards repeating the behavior. Because in all reality, you know that if your spouse makes those comments and they make you feel bad, you love your spouse and you don't want them to feel bad. And so it's going to be tempting for you to revert back to your mean. But if you have that discussion in the beginning, then that can be helpful. However, what's unique is you're not going to be able to have that discussion with every single person in your life. And so you're just going to have to realize and deal with some people are going to make those comments, and it's not going to be worth your time to have that discussion with every single person. And you have to have the ability to know that the reason why they're making those comments has nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with how bad you're making them feel. And that doesn't mean that you need to change your behavior. And so I think that's kind of a good thought process to have in regards of what you need to be aware of when you're making any behavior change, but in this case, the behavior change around your eating habits. Next, when you start tracking what it is that you eat, and if you're trying to make a difference, again, you don't need to set some sort of calorie or macro goal at the beginning. It would simply be helpful for you just to start tracking. Track for a week. And just be aware of what you're putting into your body. And then you have the ability to then go look back and look at what you've put into your body for the past 7 days and see if that data in and of itself has the ability to influence your behavior. And if it doesn't, then that's fine. It doesn't matter. But just having the information can simply be helpful. The next level or the next step that you want to do is once you start tracking, you want to have this mental awareness that you want to start moving towards eating your body weight in protein each day. And so if you weigh 150 pounds and you can move in the direction of getting 150 grams of protein each day, that is going to help make sure that you do not lose muscle over time. And so by eating grams of protein equivalent to your body weight, that can help maintain your muscle. And that also means that you're not consuming the other two micronutrients, carbs and fat, in excess of what it is that your body needs. And so first step is to track. Second step is start to develop the mental awareness that you want to match your body weight in grams of protein each day. And then just notice how much protein that you have been eating, compare it to your target, and see if you can make micro adjustments each day. What would you need to eat in order to increase your protein? And for this podcast, or for this example, let's assume that your goal here from a nutrition perspective is to just lose weight, and we'll keep it simple. Losing weight is simply being in a calorie deficit. And what's interesting about weight loss, there are so many different beliefs and systems, and there's paleo, and there's keto, and there's intermittent fasting. There's all these different strategies, and it's so easy to get lost in, well, which strategy do I try? And many of you probably have tried one of them and then realize that it's very difficult for one of those strategies to be sustainable for the rest of your life. And that's the whole point. You simply want to come up with something that is sustainable for the rest of your life. And really, that means how can you occasionally enjoy ice cream or pizza or some of what you eat every day, yet still be healthy? And don't get me wrong, your eating habits are likely going to have to drastically change, because if you want to change your eating habits or if you want to change your health, that means what you have eaten up until this point has given you the health that you currently have. And so if you want different health, then you need to eat something different. But you also want to make sure that it's going to be sustainable, and whatever your behaviors are going to be, you want them to be something that you can do for extended periods of time. And that's why I think diets like keto and paleo or intermittent fasting or things similar to that are very good from a marketing perspective, because they drive excitement and they drive revenue. But when it comes to longevity, you want something that can be simple. And something I have found to be very simple is a simple math equation. If you want to lose weight, then multiply your body weight by 10 and just have that be your calorie goal. And so if you weigh 150 pounds and you want to lose weight, then you're going to have a calorie target of 1,500 pounds. And you're going to do that for a few weeks and see how that might impact your health or your weight. Again, if you're trying to lose weight. And if you want to maintain, that number is probably closer to 15. And so if you want to do a more aggressive cut of losing weight, then the number is closer to 10 to be your multiplier by your body weight. If you want to lose weight a little bit more slowly, then that number could be closer to 13, 14. Maintenance is probably going to be somewhere around 15, but that just seems to be an easy math equation that helps. Real quick, as you guys know, I just recently started this podcast. If you could give it a rating with a quick tap of the thumb, that would mean the world to me. And even more importantly, it could help spread the word to a broader audience, which in turn could help change a life. Thank you so much, and let's get back to the show. And so, if first you have started tracking, then you have started to take mental note of how much protein that you want compared to how much protein you have been eating, and you start to make micro adjustments to seeing if you can get that protein level equivalent to your body weight. And then you can add on the small task of giving yourself a calorie target. And what's great about doing this, when you start tracking your macros or tracking your calories, what you'll find is it's not something that you'll need to do for the rest of your life, because over time, you're going to just know, because you've done it so much, relatively how much each thing is putting into your body in terms of carbs, fat, protein. And you can likely stop having to track every day. But if you track for a little bit, it is going to build these new learning receptors in your brain that you didn't have before. It's going to build new awareness that you didn't have before. And if you do it long enough, just like if you do anything else long enough, then you're going to get a relative amount of how much each thing is that's going into your body. And it's not something that you have to track on an app if you don't want to for the rest of your life. But if you do it for, say, 6 months, or even start with a month and see how that goes. But if you do it for 6 months, then over time you're going to learn all of the things that you're eating, the impact that they have on you. You're either going to fall in love with the process of tracking those things, or you're just going to eat similar meals each day and you're going to know, and then you don't need to track it anymore. And if you see your weight start to change, then you can adjust. But going back to multiplying your body weight by 10, giving yourself a target, and within that target, so in this example, if you're 150 pounds and you want to lose weight, then your calorie target becomes 1,500. And while your calorie target is 1,500, you know that you need to eat 150 grams of protein. Then you can figure out what's left, right? If I eat 150 grams of protein, how many grams of carbs and how many grams of fat does that give me left for the rest of the day? And a quick side note, 1 gram of protein has 4 calories, 1 gram of carb has 4 calories, 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. So everything that you eat, if you have 150 grams of protein, that's going to be 600 calories raw. Now, in most proteins, whether it's animal protein or something like Greek yogurt, whatever the protein, it's that food source is probably not going to be 100% protein. And so, for example, if you eat 8 ounces of white chicken meat, that's going to be around 50 grams of protein, but it's probably going to be around 250 calories because there's going to be some carbs in there or some fat in there. And so, as an easy multiple, if you're eating 150 grams of protein each day because that's your body weight, then you multiply that by 5, you know that you're going to approximately get about 750 calories from protein. And then that means you can do whatever you want with your other 750 calories. So you can set carb and fat goals if you want to, but for this example, let's just, you know that you're going to give yourself a target of protein, and you can do whatever you want with the others. And so if you're going to eat 1,500 calories, 150 grams of protein is going to be equal to about 750 calories, and you're going to have another 750 calories to do whatever you want. And if you track it like that, then that can make it very simple. If you want to add another layer, and let's say you want to get more aggressive with your cut, then having the awareness that a simple baseline, roughly every 3,000 calories you burn, is going to be the equivalent of dropping a pound. And so, for example, if you were to burn about 500 calories per day of doing some sort of cardio over the course of a week, that's going to be the equivalent of you losing a pound. And so another layer here is if you want to include cardio, and 500 calories a day is not something that is super simple. I would suggest doing this at keeping your heart rate around a zone 2 level, which, to keep things simple here, I would just Google how to calculate my max heart rate and look at zone 2. It's probably going to be about 70% of your max. And to burn 500 calories, you're going to need to be in that zone 2 level for a good 60 plus minutes, maybe 60 to 75 minutes. And so that may be a tall task, but I want you to be aware that being that losing weight is a simple calculation of being in a calorie deficit. Obviously, that means the more calories that you can burn and keep your nutrition the same, you are going to lose more weight. And so it may be beneficial for you to know that for every 3,000 calories you burn, that is going to be the equivalent of about a pound. And that's not a direct science, and I'm not a scientist. That is just what I have found to be helpful for me. So use that as you may. But if you take all of these steps, and so let's recap. First, you're going to start tracking what you put in your body. Next, you're just going to observe the past week. What have you put into your body? How many grams of protein, grams of carbs, and grams of fat are you eating on average each day? Take mental note that you want to start moving towards eating the equivalent of your body weight in grams of protein. Come up with a calorie goal that is going to be a multiplier of your body weight times 10, and that is going to set you up to lose weight. And then within that goal, make sure that you're hitting your grams of protein per day. And if you want to add in some cardio to bring off that weight more quickly, then that is going to enable you to do that. That being the calculation of about 3,000 calories that you burn during cardio is going to be the equivalent of about a pound. And so those are all of the tactical things that you can do from an eating perspective. Those are all of the small steps. And I think what's really important here is while you're monitoring this, don't beat yourself up if you go over. Who cares, right? If you start tracking and you set yourself a calorie target of 1,500 calories and you notice that you go over because you had a drink with friends or it's the weekend and you had a piece of cake or whatever the case might be, it's really important to not think to yourself, well, I'm over. I didn't hit my calorie goal today, so I guess I can eat whatever I want. because it's never a binary of did I hit my goal or did I not hit my goal. It's always a to what extent did I go over or to what extent did I go under. And so if you go over one day, be easy on yourself and realize how much you went over. Let's say you went over by 250. Well, the next day, you know how you can make that up? Just go under by 250. Or if for some reason that you can't do that, there's no reason to make it this big deal and make things more complicated for yourself. Just hit your target the next day. What's most important is that you are kind to yourself and that you just give yourself a target that you can sustain over a long period of time. And so it's important to realize, never think about this as a binary of did I or did I not hit my goal. It's always to what extent did I miss, to what extent did I go over, or to what extent did I hit. And if you think of it that way, then you can just be a little bit more easy and on yourself and give yourself some grace. And so while you're doing all of those things, you're going to be doing some significant behavior changes. And those behavior changes are going to be noticeable by your spouse. And here are some things that I would suggest that in regards to your relationship, you engage in these types of behaviors with your spouse as your spouse is noticing you changing your behavior in regards to your eating habits. Don't try to put what it is that you're trying to accomplish onto your spouse. In other words, not once through the entire process should you say something to your spouse like, see, maybe you should do it too. Or why don't you try to do it? That is not going to be fruitful, especially if you're female and you're trying to communicate to a male, because we as males, for some reason, are wired to believe that if it's our idea and we do it ourselves, then that is something that we're going to be much more likely to follow through on. And if it's something that someone is trying to push on us, it's almost like we naturally repel against that thought. And so put zero effort into trying to change the behavior of your spouse. Just focus on you and do all of the steps and the tactics that we talked about previously without trying to make your behaviors part of your spouse's life. Another thing that you can do with your spouse is share subtle progress. So if you start to do this over a period of time, you're going to start losing weight. And comment to your spouse, hey, I just wanted you to know, guess what? I have done this, or here has been the impact, or I'm down 2 pounds, I'm down 3 pounds. Commenting your little victories, but doing so without gloating, can help your spouse see that your simple behavior changes are leaning to some different outcomes. And that can be pretty influential to your spouse. Whether he or she decides to admit that it's influential or not, just sharing your subtle progress can be good. But again, don't share it from a standpoint of your gloating. Just share it. And another thing that could be helpful is just talking about how much better you feel. Because if you make these changes over a long period of time, you are going to notice a drastic difference in how you feel. Because if you weren't eating particularly healthy before and you move more towards a consistent behavior of eating more healthy, then you're going to feel different. And commenting to your spouse just how your different behaviors are making you feel is going to help inspire some curiosity into your spouse. You might find that he or she start asking you questions about it or becoming interested, and that's by design, right? The way that you influence somebody is by talking about how your behavior changes are making you feel and what this impact to your behaviors is having on you. And that can help someone get genuinely curious on where you are. So don't gloat. Don't try to put what it is that you're doing onto your spouse, but just comment these little progress updates to your spouse and talk about how they're making you feel better. And that could help inspire, at a minimum, some curiosity, if not some behavior change. And so tying this all together, If you can be clear with your spouse on what your vision for your life is, why it's important to you, and tell your spouse, be very clear how your spouse can support you. If you can put yourself around more people who share your vision, in other words, if you want to have a very healthy life and you have a vision for what your health and your eating habits look like, if you put yourself around people that have a similar vision, guess what's going to happen? It's going to become a lot easier for you to achieve your goals. That's why it's so important. One of the most common things that you'll hear about people that are successful is, show me the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and I'll show you your health, I'll show you your wealth, right? But if you're always hanging around people who care about drinking or eating ice cream all the time or whatever they might be into, then you're going to be influenced by those behaviors. And so if you want to achieve behaviors that you are not consistently achieving now, put yourself around people who are consistently demonstrating those behaviors, and you'll find how much easier it is for you to get to those places. Next, don't try to change the behavior of your spouse. Use the excess energy that you're going to now have, because trust me, you're going to have more energy if you take care of your health and you change your eating habits. You'll find that your energy level will be increased, and take that extra energy and that you've given yourself and pour even more of that energy into your spouse. Don't try to change your spouse's behavior. Show your spouse even more love, because the best way to influence or show your spouse the positive impact about what you're doing regarding your health is by not trying to change who it is that they are, or not trying to change their behavior. Start to track your calories and your macros, and eventually give yourself a target that feels right. And just remember that your goal here is to learn, and your goal is not to participate in something that is not going to be sustainable for a long period of time. And if you're making a lifestyle change, the key is to add these small, sustainable steps and not try to do something that is not sustainable for a long term. And then once you give yourself that target, always remember that it's never a binary whether or not you hit the target. It's simply, to what extent did I hit it, or to what extent did I not hit it? Give yourself some grace and don't get discouraged when it's an off day. Just take mental note of it, or take physical note of how much you're off and make the adjustment on the next day. And I think what's really cool about this, here are the possible scenarios I think that you'll have with your spouse if you can be consistent with this over a long period of time. 1, your spouse falls in love with who you're becoming and is inspired by you, and you have the ability to influence their own behavior, not because you want them to change, but because you're so focused on making yourself better that you know what is attractive, or do you know what is going to emanate from yourself. Is if you're in the self-improvement stage, then the people that you're naturally spending the most time with are going to feed off of that. It's contagious, right? So what they do with their behavior is up to them, but in this scenario, I think it's very likely that your spouse falls in love with who you're becoming, gets inspired by you, and has genuine curiosity on how they can do it for themselves. Another scenario is that your spouse is not supportive, continues to make derogatory comments that are in conflict with what your vision is, maybe continues to give you these little jabs, even though you've talked to them up front about how that's not helpful and how you could use their support by doing just the opposite. And in all reality, in this example, I think it's important to think long and hard about the vision that you have for you, what it is that you want, why you want it, and be very open very frequently with your spouse about what your vision is, why you want it, and how those derogatory comments or their behavior is impacting what it is that you want. And I think the more uncomfortable conversations you can have with your spouse about that, the better, right? And I think a big part of the reason why we don't have those conversations is because we might be scared of losing something, when in reality, what I have found is by me getting through the discomfort or the fear of losing something because I'm just so scared to talk about it, I actually address something that is uncomfortable in the moment, but turns into this really, really cool discussion because my spouse is getting to know me on a little bit deeper of a level. They understand me on a little bit deeper of a level because I'm sharing my vision about what it is that I want. Then that's naturally going to lead to conversation about me understanding my spouse's vision for what it is that they want. I can truly come at it from an understanding versus trying to change who they are. And those types of uncomfortable conversations can turn into these really magnetic moments with your partner. And I think they can become very helpful. Or the third scenario with your spouse is maybe it's somewhere in between and it's something that you guys work on together. Because again, I really like the thought of you don't win at marriage, right? Just like you don't win at health. The goal of these games that we play, whether it's marriage or health, is that we just keep doing them. And so by engaging in fruitful and uncomfortable conversations with your spouse, you are going to constantly be working on your marriage. And everyone I've been talked to that has been married for 30 plus years, a lot of what I hear from them is they're constantly working on their marriage, right? And so if it's some sort of in between of you influencing them versus they're not as supportive, as long as you're addressing that, addressing your vision, what it is that you want for your life, and you're having some good, uncomfortable conversations consistently, then you're always working on that relationship together, and it can be something that can be fruitful. So that was a long one. I know we covered a lot of different things there, a lot of tactics around nutrition and weight loss. So I hope some of that information was helpful. A lot of relationship dynamic, because in order to make a behavior change, we need to have very good conversations with the person that we spend the most time with. And so I hope you guys got some value out of that. I'm very passionate and I love the topic of fitness and nutrition. And I know this was a little different than my real estate content or maybe some of the other stuff that I put out. But I got this question and I got asked because health is something that's very important to me. And I think that's evident to the people that I spend time with. And so this person just asked that question, and I wanted to make this specifically for them, but I thought it was a good one to share with all of you because you might be going through something similar or have similar questions. So thank you guys so much for listening. I love you guys. I really appreciate you giving me your attention for the last however long. And I really hope you guys got some value out of it. And if you did, it would mean a lot to me if you could share this with someone who you think this might serve. So thank you guys so much. Have a great day. And until the next one, I'll see you. Peace.